Hey guys, this is Cave, and I'm a teacher at Roseville Area High School, and I am with Nick Palladian Esquire. Nick is an attorney for the Legal Rights Center in Minneapolis. Welcome, Nick.
James, good to see you. Glad to be back.
Of course, good to see you. It's been a while. So, episode number 2 about the murder of Daunte Wright. Today, or yesterday, I mean, the charges were filed against police officer Kim Potter, and she was arrested. Could you explain what that process is like? I mean, it sounds like she was arrested immediately after the charges were filed.
Yeah, so it was the BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. That's basically Minnesota's version of the local FBI. They were the ones who led the investigation. They drew up the complaint. And once they decided that there was probable cause to charge her, they did what typically happens when there's probable cause to arrest someone. They went and arrested her and brought her to the Hennepin County Jail.
So what does an arrest in this kind of case look like? I mean, I know what it looks like on TV and movies, but do they call her up and say, hey, you want to get your toothbrush? We're coming over. Or do they just, I mean, is she surprised? Does she, how does that work practically in a real world, not just on TV?
Right. Yeah. For any of my clients, it usually involves them with a warrant coming through a door or grabbing people right on the street. For this cop, I would assume she already had a lawyer. I would assume that she may have been given a heads up in saying, hey, pack your bag. She's not going anywhere. Don't worry. She'll be here waiting for you guys. I don't know if that is how it happened. But I would assume my guessing hunch would be that she knew about it and she was ready when they knocked on her door, or when she got the knock, she knew what it was.
So I know that Mike Freeman is the Hennepin County prosecutor, but I haven't heard his name connected with the charges. Why is that?
Yeah, so the decision to have Pete Orpett, he's the Washington County attorney, decide whether and what to charge in this case is apparently the result of an agreement that sort of the surrounding metro county attorneys, and when I say the county attorneys, I mean the lead attorneys. So Mike Freeman, John Choi, Pete Orpett, and the other folks I don't know their names right now. But apparently what they agreed to approximately a year ago was that when there is a choice of whether or not to charge an officer in their respective counties, they are going to give that decision to a different county attorney, right? So in this case, it happened in Washington County. For that reason, Mike Freeman asked a different county attorney from a different county to make that decision. The reason for that presumably being, we don't want any conflict of interest, right? If you think about it, cops are basically employees, almost, of the prosecutor's office, right? The police are the ones who arrest people, they conduct investigations, they act as witnesses, they help put people away, they help prosecutors do their job. So, rightly so, people could think, hey, why is their boss, their quasi-boss, getting to make this decision? That doesn't necessarily seem right. Some problems with this are that there have been at least 2 incidences where the Hennepin County Attorney's Office declined to bring charges against 2 separate officers and 2 separate killing incidences. Supposedly during the same time period where this refer it out agreement was in place. So I think there is some question about when this agreement may actually have been come into fruition and whether it's being followed or what these terms are. So for this one, yes, it seems like there were 2 prior instances where for whatever reason it stuck with Freeman and he made the choice instead of referring it out.
Yeah, editorial comment. Mike Freeman is shady as hell, but but that's for another episode. If I remember right, it feels like Kim Potter's, and again, for everybody out there, Kim Potter was the police officer who shot and killed Daunte Wright this past weekend. It feels like her bail was set much lower than Derek Chauvin's. Is that right? And if it is, why wouldn't it be the same?
Yeah, good question. It is significantly lower. So there are two types of sort of release that are used in Minnesota. You have what's called uh, straight, release, unconditional release or conditional release, right? And that's basically what you think about bail, of saying if you pay this money or pay this bonds person to give that amount, to promise that amount of money for you to come back to court, you can get out of custody and keep living your life as long as you come back to all your court proceedings and you remain law abiding. That comes in two forms. One is where you can pay a higher amount of money and be out without any conditions. So one condition could be call a supervising probation agent once a week, right? If I pay the higher amount of money, I won't have to follow that condition. I just need to come back to court. But like most people, if I don't have a ton of money necessarily lying around on the couch, I'll pay the lesser amount, but I'll have to do a few more things while I'm out and about on my release. The bail for Derek Chauvin's case was $1 million, and then I believe maybe $500,000 or $750,000 for the other option. In Kim Potter's case, the unconditional amount for her was, I believe, $100,000, and the conditional amount was $50,000. Typically, you pay 10% to a bonds person to post that amount. So if she paid the highest amount, she would pay $10,000 to the bonding agency. I'm assuming the police union or some other entity posted her bond. So I don't know if she's out any money. But yeah, it's significantly lower. And the question was why? What a court considers primarily when looking at bail or conditional release, it's what is the public safety component to letting this person go? And what is the flight risk of letting this person go, right? Are they going to do more harm if they're out, and or are they going to run away, right? The charges between these two officers are significantly different. She's charged with second-degree manslaughter only at this point, and Derek Chauvin was charged with murder plus manslaughter. So the charges themselves were significantly different. The information contained within the complaint, that charging document, is also significantly different, right? Obviously, it's another Black man dead at the hands of police. But I think an objective reading of it is they're of course both horrendous and should not have happened, but they got there two different ways, right? I think Derek Chauvin's actions are objectively more malicious and more malevolent than giving Miss Potter the benefit of the doubt, what appears to be, from her perspective, an accident, right? Whether or not people buy that or that's true, if you look at these two things side by side, they just are different. So the judge is probably thinking, as opposed to Derek Chauvin, this person's may very well have done this by accident, and it's a manslaughter charge only. It's not murder. I think she's going to come back to court. She did give up her passport, I believe, so she can't flee the country.
Does the court ask for the passport?
Yep, I believe that is one of her conditions of release, that she had to give up the passport. Yep. And
so
usually,
go ahead.
Sorry. Usually they can deliver it to the court, or oftentimes they instruct them to give it to the defense attorney to hold on.
Okay. So a couple things. One, more of a comment. This bail system seems really unjust if it boils down to money and how much money someone can afford. But that's probably a whole nother season of episodes.
Yep.
Just random, but what happens to the bail money? So let's say the trial's over for anybody. What happens to the money? You get your money back? Is it non-refundable deposit? What happens to the bail money?
Yeah. So this example, right? If your bail is $100,000, I don't have that much cash laying around. But let's say I have $10,000 that I can scrape together, right? I go to the bail bonding company and they say, cool, we'll be the guarantor of that, right? We'll tell the court, hey, court, Nick's going to show up. If he doesn't, we're on the hook for $100,000. Nick, as part of that, you're going to pay me $10,000 to have some skin in the game. So let's say we go through the trial, I show up, I'm convicted, I get sentenced to prison. I don't get that money back from the bail bonding company. That was the price. I bought a bond, right?
Mhm.
On the other hand, let's say my bail was $1,000, or let's say the judge said you can post $100,000 bond or $10,000 cash bail. So either way, I'm shelling out $10,000 in that situation. If it's cash bail, I give that money to the court, and even if I get convicted and go to prison, I get that money back at the end of it.
Okay.
So that's, a lot of times for especially clients who have very limited financial means. And I agree with you, the bail system is outrageous, and we should do an episode on that. I would love to.
Okay.
We ask for lower amounts to say, Judge, this person can afford that much, or at least give them a cash option. So if they put up $100, they can at least get it back instead of never being able to recover that because they had to buy a bond.
Gotcha. Okay, so if I heard you right, before this episode, you had talked about Kim Potter receiving a little bit of protection. What does her yard look like right now?
It looks like downtown Minneapolis. It looks like another, green zone where you've got cement cinder blocks up, you've got barbed wire, you've got fences, you've got 24-hour video security surveillance, you've got police officers on patrol there guarding and protecting her and her property. So yeah, I mean, the comment was similar to when this happened with Derek Chauvin. And that was obviously on a much bigger scale.
Yep.
I don't know who pays for this. I don't know what authority they have to do that. Obviously, and that's not me saying I want something. I want people to go to her home, or I want her property to be vandalized or her harmed. I don't want that. We do not want that. But yeah, I think you had maybe probably correctly said that the police union might be paying for that. So yeah, it's just interesting that when police are charged with crimes, they get state protection and expensive state protection, or at least cops who are maybe off duty, but for all intents and purposes, still acting as police officers.
And so there are police officers there who are guarding or standing guard or whatever.
From the clip that I saw, and I think I don't know if it was CNN or Court TV, one of the news stations that I saw, that's what it looked like. They had a squad car in the driveway, they had officers there, and the fencing and everything like that.
Okay.
And when Derek Chauvin initially, I mean, it was basically the whole block was it wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder. I was going to say soldiers, not soldiers, but they looked like police.
Yeah. So could you talk about the charges against Officer Potter and why maybe you're frustrated with that, or why one would become frustrated with those charges?
Yeah, so she's currently charged with second-degree manslaughter, and that's one of the charges that Derek Chauvin is facing, right? And that for Derek Chauvin, that's the least serious charge. What that's saying is that in this case, Kim Potter caused the death of Daunte Wright by behaving and engaging in culpably negligent conduct, consciously creating this risk, doing this thing, right? In my opinion, and I think some other folks' opinions, again, lots of people disagree, so I always put an asterisk by here, but I think the second-degree murder charge is actually the easiest charge to prove in the Chauvin case, and I absolutely think there's probable cause to charge and add that count of second-degree murder for Miss Potter's case as well. And the reason I'm disappointed in not seeing that is I do think that it was a fight to get it for Derek Chauvin, right? You had to have the attorney general come in and do the thing that made sense. And in this case, I think there's absolutely probable cause, and it's in line with what they've charged Derek Chauvin with what they charged Officer Noor with.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So it's just a little shocking and confusing to see that they didn't add that on there, right? Typically, the state is very happy to add charges against people, particularly defendants who are not police officers, aka the general public. And they don't worry about saying, well, here's how it could be weak, or it might be weak, or we want to do a little more investigating. The vast majority of the people don't get that same treatment. They don't get that same consideration. So For second-degree murder, what they have to show is that she caused the death of Daunte Wright while committing a felony. The underlying felony in this case would be, presumably, third-degree assault, saying you intentionally inflicted bodily harm, and that bodily harm was substantial. Again, just like in Derek Chauvin's case, obviously the death of somebody is substantial bodily harm, right? And the only way it wouldn't be a felony, the way it would not be considered assault, is if her use of force was authorized. And again, I would anticipate use of force experts would come in and say shooting somebody in that situation was not an objectively reasonable use of force. And I think you can tell that by the fact that, again, giving her the benefit of the doubt, she assumed that she was using her taser. She didn't mean to pull her gun, right? That is at least one more telling point to say, if she thought it was reasonable, she probably would have grabbed, I mean, she did grab her gun, but she would have intended to grab her gun, right?
Yeah.
So the level, when I say intentionally inflicted bodily harm, that word intentionally is really annoying. It's not saying that, again, give her the benefit of the doubt. It's not saying that she intended to use her gun, right?
That's what
she's
it sounds like to me. I'm like, well, she's saying it's not intentional, but it's not what the word means in that case.
Exactly. So she's saying it's not intentional, but legally, assault harm is what's called a general intent crime, meaning as long as you made the physical movements of your own volition, you intended your action. It doesn't matter if you didn't intend the outcome or the harm, or you didn't intend to break the law. If you, of your own volition, made those movements, presumably you intended that action, right? Even if it was a mistake.
Yep.
She still intentionally reached down. She pulled it, she pointed it, she placed it, and she pulled the trigger, right? She wasn't having a seizure. There was nobody moving her arm for her. She was volitionally making those movements. So that would mean, in my opinion, there's at least probable cause to charge her. And it just really begs the question of, if this person weren't a police officer, would they get the same treatment? And also, the state is going to have to prove for second-degree manslaughter that she consciously did what she did, right? And I think she has a strong argument there. A defense attorney is going to have lots of arguments to make, saying, hey, folks, she didn't know what she was doing, right? In order to consciously do something, you have to know what you're doing. That means she would have to look at her gun, know it's a gun, know it's dangerous, and still do the thing. But the video camera plausibly shows that that's not the case, right? Versus the assault, which is a general intent crime.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if she didn't intend to draw, if she intended to draw the taser, she still made that movement of her own volition. Yeah. So in my opinion, it's an easier charge to prove, and it's weird. It's confusing that they didn't bring it, because even if another attorney disagrees with me, you can still bring it and make the defense attorney argue against it, or put it to a jury and let a jury decide, right? And I had sort of looked up the Officer Yanez Philando Castile case, right, where Officer Yanez was put on trial, and he was charged with I think second-degree manslaughter, so I think the same charge, and he was found not guilty of that, right? And again, I didn't follow that. Unfortunately, I didn't follow that trial as closely, and it definitely wasn't filmed. But it just seems like there are, I think, logistical problems where there is a strong defense for Officer Potter to argue against that conscious requirement. Okay. Whereas that argument might not have to be made if they charge her with second-degree unintentional murder.
Gotcha. So can a county attorney, county prosecutor, Washington County in this case, can he change his mind and say, oh, we're going to add this? Or can that only be added if the attorney general takes the case?
The county attorney with the case can amend it.
Okay.
Pretty much, they have a lot of leniency to do that. So yes, they can absolutely, they could start with this charge, and it might be the case, right? Maybe they just want to get the ball rolling, and they're gonna. I guarantee, I would be shocked if they're not having these discussions about, should we add on murder, should we add on third-degree murder, should we add on second, should we add none? So they definitely can amend the charges. I would be a little surprised if Governor Walz didn't ask Keith Ellison's office to take this case on again. You know, a lot of folks have pointed out that Washington County, you know, presuming they are still public servants, they are public servants in Washington County, right? They don't have the same ties or connections or responsibility to the folks of Hennepin County, right? In addition to the AG's office is sort of like, they are the people's attorney, right? And we felt comfortable, we felt better having them prosecute the police instead of, again, a county agency. So, you know, and I think Pete Orput also was the volunteers with, or has some involvement with, the police union or some organization, something like that. So there, again, you know, people can have their own opinions on it, but there is at least some concern by communities of his ties to some extent with law enforcement as well. So, you know, the AG is also technically the top prosecutor in the state of Minnesota, so they absolutely have their own ties with, you know, with law enforcement to some capacity as well. But I think from a public trust standpoint, I think people trust the Attorney General right now. They trust Keith Ellison, they trust his office, and they were the ones who did come in and add the murder charge to Derek Chauvin's case, presumably showing the community, hey, we're taking this very seriously.
Can the opposite happen? Can Pete Opitz, is that the man's name?
Orput, O-R-P-U-T.
Okay, Orput, can he say, hey, Keith Ellison, I don't want this. I don't want to be involved in this. I think it's best if you take it.
Really good question. So there are two ways the AG's office I believe can come onto a criminal case. So one is at the request of a county attorney. So the scenario you just described, Pete Orput could call him up and say, hey, I would like you to take over this case. Please come do that. The other way is, once a case has been charged, then the governor can direct the AG to step in and take over. So now that the case has been charged, my reading of that statute, I can't remember the statute number, would be that Governor Walz can now tell Keith Ellison, hey, AG Ellison, your office is going to take this case, go do it.
Okay. Backpedaling just a little bit. So a couple days ago, Kim Potter resigned from the police force in Brooklyn Center. Is there any strategic logic to resigning, or was it just, it wouldn't have mattered? I mean, she's going to be fired, so she resigned first, or is there an actual reason why one would resign as opposed to being fired?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, presumably she knows she'll be fired.
Have anything to do with her pension? If you fired, you don't get it, but if you resign, you do. I have no idea, but
yeah, no, I don't either. I mean, the pension was my first thought of, you know, nah, you're probably going to lose your pension. But yeah, I don't know. From a legal standpoint, I don't think, you know, take the Chauvin case, for example, they weren't allowed to get into that they fired him or why they fired him. All they could say was his last day of employment with us was May 26th. Again, live under a rock to not know why. So it, you know, it's not like it provides her much cover here.
Okay.
But it very well could be something with pension or benefits. Yeah.
Two quick questions to end. Number one, if Washington County does prosecute this case, I assume the jury is made up of people from Hennepin County, or would they be made up of people from Washington County?
Yeah, so the venue will still be Hennepin County. So they will hoof it on over to Hennepin County.
Okay.
The prosecutor who's doing it currently, so I actually clerked my first year of law school, I clerked at the Washington County Attorney's Office. So the attorney who was in charge of the intern pool there, he is the attorney of record on this case. He is actually a former Hennepin County public defender. And then he switched at some point in time to go become a prosecutor in Washington. So, again, not super, impactful to the case, but he is familiar with Hennepin County.
Okay.
And he did used to work as a public defender there.
Okay.
But yeah, they'll make the hoof on over. Transfer of venue, would be in rare circumstances. They didn't even get it in the Chauvin case, which again, where are you going to go that nobody's heard about this?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe last question, we'll see. When can we expect, so it seemed like it took forever, from May to March to get the trial of Derek Chauvin going. When can we expect the trial for Kim Potter to start? Same 8 months, 9 months later, or I guess we were dealing with a pandemic kind of, getting to the height of a pandemic. Maybe that had something to do with it. But when can we look forward to the trial of Kim Potter?
Yeah, I would anticipate not for a little while unless there's some sort of plea agreement. Again, they're going to have to hunt down medical experts depending on any defenses she might raise. They're going to have to bring in use of force experts. And with the pandemic going on, people are getting vaccinated. COVID is either going away / we're just choosing to care less about it and getting back to day-to-day life. So the court system is incredibly clogged up right now. So we have had trials were not, and for the most part still are not happening in Hennepin County until next month. So all of these other cases are going to be coming through the bottleneck. The floodgates are opening on top of all the discovery they're going to have to get. They have, I don't know if the FBI is helping out in this case. The FBI building is down the block basically from the Brooklyn Center Police Department. So they might be involved with some capacity anyway. You had 380, 400 potential witnesses for Derek Chauvin's case.
Yeah.
Different situation here, but I would anticipate it's going to be a while, especially if she's going to take it to trial. Sometimes you're not in any rush to potentially go to prison.
Yeah. That makes sense. I guess one more question I just thought of. So there are 2 other police officers on the scene. Are there any charges against them, or are they going to be fired? Are they going to resign? Or in this case, it was clearly one person, whereas in the murder of George Floyd, all 4 officers were involved in the physicality or the restraining of George Floyd. Can the other 2 officers face any charges, or does it look like that won't happen?
I'd be shocked. I don't think there are any charges going to be coming down the pipeline. I am guessing they're on standard administrative leave whenever there's a shooting incident or a death incident. But if you watch the video, they were, for all intents and purposes, doing a quote unquote, and I hate this term, but routine stop, right? They weren't helping anybody knee on anybody's neck. The officer who was doing the cuffing, you saw a look of surprise on his face. He jumped away. So I don't think there's any accomplice liability or aiding and abetting in any sense like this. I think it's just going to be Kim Potter. And I actually, anticipate we'll see the 2 officers testifying. Again, I don't think they'll be
whom?
For the state. I mean, I would anticipate the defense will get their point across that, well, he was resisting, and that's what, you were about to handcuff him and he jumped back in the car, and that's what led to the use of force. Yes. So I don't think there's a Fifth Amendment issue that would come into play. I don't think they're looking at charges. So whether it is the state or the defense, I'm assuming we'll see those 2 at trial.
Okay, sorry, one more. Could the one person be called by both sides, but to address a separate topic?
Yeah, and we saw that, for example, in the Chauvin case. Chauvin, yes. We saw that in his case with the Minneapolis police medical trainer person.
Yeah.
Her name is escaping me, but the state called her as a witness. And the defense essentially started to use her as their own witness, talking about excited delirium. And they sort of shut that down and said, no, if you want to get into that, you can call her as your own witness.
Okay.
So the defense did just that. They recalled her and had a direct examination with her. And you're allowed to call the same witnesses. So a lot of times you'll see the same witness on both witness lists.
Okay. Okay. Well, I better stop asking questions because I feel like maybe this is going long. Again, I think it boils down to just stop shooting black men. I think that would put us out of business, and I'd appreciate that. Although I guess we're not in business, but you know what I mean. Nick, thank you very much for the insight. I'm sick that we have to have these kind of episodes, but I know that our viewers find them helpful. So I appreciate it.
Nope, absolutely, and couldn't agree more. If black people could stop being killed by police, I would be happy to not. I would be happy to just see you in the driveway when we're taking out the trash.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Thanks, Nick.
Take care, James.